There is a parallel in the universe of Tales of Atonement based largely on the fact that our two authors grew up watching Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon respectively. These stories have injected many of the core values of these series into everything from the magical power system to even some of the alien races. And the interesting thing is, Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball are more closely linked than you might think. But before we get into that, I think a few introductions might be in order. Maybe I should leave this to you, Bree. That way I don't overstep my bounds. Want to handle this part?
Sure. I guess I know more about the main character that we're talking about right now than most do. Well, the character of Chaos is my mother. Chaos is the main character of Tales of Atonement, Exodus. That's the one with the spaceship. The first chapter is available on Patreon right now, actually, if you're interested in reading it. She's heavily based on the magical girl genre, plus like space opera and space traveler anime like Sailor Moon, characters like Haruka, Cowboy Bebop, characters like Faye, and even a little bit of Ed, Outlaw Star, with Twilight Suzuka and Aisha Clan. Fooly Cooly, definitely Haruko Harahara kind of energy. And Tenchi Universe, Ryoko and Ryo-Oki. There's a reason why I mentioned Ryo-Oki in there, and we'll get there too. Like, her cat-like companion is based on characters like Luna and Artemis, Ryo-Oki, respectively, further strengthening the Sailor Moon parallels, as well as Tenchi. Animal-like companions are common with Disney princesses, but Chaos's crass nature breaks that expected trope. She's more like, I don't know, Ramona Flowers or Tank Girl. A manic pixie dream girl, just not your manic pixie dream girl.
Come to think of it, I did a video on pain once before when we were talking about the Pokemon v Power World stuff. That's been going well for them, huh? I don't know, between Power World and Animo, Pokemon might be in trouble.
I sure hope so. I mean, I don't have any opinion on that.
Right, so let's talk about the deep cultural link between Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball. In order to do that, we need to look at the mythological inspiration that began the entire series. Sailor Moon follows the story of Usagi Tsukino. At first, she just seems like a normal middle school girl living in Japan. She's a Cancer, her birthday is June 30th, and her name literally means Bunny of the Moon. This character, Tsuki, means moon, and this one is literally the Japanese word for rabbit, or bunny. This name relates to the ancient fairy tale Legend of the Bamboo Cutter, in which a princess, Kaguya, is found within a stalk of bamboo plant by a bamboo farmer. The farmer raises the princess as his daughter, and eventually she must return to the moon to assume her throne. Kaguya has been referenced in stories like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Naruto, Kaguya-sama: Love is War, and many other places. The story of Kaguya is thought to be the world's oldest known fairy tale, dating all the way back to the Heian period of Japan, roughly between 800 and 1200 CE. It's even cross-referenced in Journey to the West, where Sun Wukong fights the Jade Rabbit mistaken for a demon in disguise. So yeah, there you go. Dragon Ball v Sailor Moon is actually canon. Case closed, video over.
Wait, what? Hold it, Agni.
Just kidding. Why don't I explain some of the interesting aspects of the Moon Rabbit that went into making the titular character? It's more than just a name. One of Sailor Moon's primary abilities is Moon Healing Escalation. This is an attack that she uses to heal people affected by the Dark Moon's power, and it's based on the fact that the Moon Rabbit's primary function mythology is also that of a healer. You've probably seen pictures of a rabbit pounding a mortar in various classic art. What the rabbit is making varies by culture. In Chinese, the rabbit pounds out the elixir of life. In Japan, the rabbit is making mochi, and in Korea, it's taeok, a type of rice cake. Vietnamese mythology is very similar to Chinese, and where the rabbit creates an elixir of immortality. But no matter how it's described, the rabbit is always making some kind of special cake, medicine, or treat for mortals to eat, which is also kind of ironic since Usagi, famously is a really terrible cook.
It's not that she's a terrible cook, it's that Even though all of her food kind of tastes good, it looks awful.
I think it still fairly well subverts the trope to an extent because certain characters, for instance, characters like Makoto, are still way better cooks. Sailor Moon's mythological inspirations don't just stop at Chinese or Japanese rabbits. Naoko Takeuchi, the series author, also included a fair amount of Greek and Roman references into her famous work. For instance, a lot of the other scouts are named after planets in the solar system, but more than that, they also represent certain things about the deities that those planets are named after. Take Sailor Jupiter, for example. Her attacks mostly deal lightning damage. This isn't just a reference to the storms in Jupiter's atmosphere, such as the Great Red Spot, it's also because Jupiter is the Roman equivalent to Zeus, and both have been known to punish their enemies with bolts of pure electricity. Sailor Venus is also based on the goddess that shares her divine profile with Aphrodite, has powers themed around love, beauty, and femininity. We could probably spend the next hour listing off different scouts, how they compare in this way, but what about Chaos? What would her Sailor Scout profile be like? Well, if you ask me, we'd have to stick with a Roman or Grecian goddess theme. So Bree, take your pick. Either Sailor Eris or Sailor Discordia.
That's a good question. Eris is kind of the goddess of chaos itself in ways, so that's a little obvious. But then again, Discordia is actually made serious mention in the book series, so a bit subversive. Sailor Discordia.
Well, Eris is the Greek goddess of chaos and the personification of strife and discord, particularly in battle. Her Roman equivalent is Discordia, and they largely share the same purpose. One of the most notable things about Eris's contribution to the mythological world was initiating the fight between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, the outcome of which actually sparked the Trojan War. She is said to be the daughter of the night, the goddess Nyx, and all of her children are things like toil, famine, pain, delusion, doom, death, the fates, indignation, deceit, and even old age.
Cool. So she was a Psychen.
Somehow probably worse than that, but anyway, I bet you're all wondering exactly how Eris sparked a fight between 3 other goddesses. This is honestly the most awesome and petty thing I've read to date. So as the story goes, all of the gods and goddesses were invited to the wedding of the king of Pythia, except Eris. You can already see where this is going, right?
Kind of like the original story of Sleeping Beauty, where it was just one of the Fae just accidentally didn't get invited, got so bitter, and then decided to absolutely wreak havoc on the royal family for it.
Well, sure, almost. Eris decided to crash the wedding and show up anyway, but the rest of the gods refused to let her in. They were like, no, you're gonna start some damn drama. Of course, because she's the goddess of discord and strife. So what did she do? Of course, she caused some drama. Eris took a golden apple and inscribed, "For the fairest," and then threw it into the wedding party. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite pounced like a trio of rabid bridesmaids, with the 3 of them all laying claim to the apple. This disagreement could only be settled by the Prince of Troy, who was also in attendance. So the goddesses all went to the prince and asked him to choose. But Prince Paris was not a fair judge. He'd already accepted a bribe from Aphrodite, and so of course he chose her. So Aphrodite got the apple, and in return she gave Paris Helen of Sparta. Paris took Helen back to Troy, and the Greeks invaded, and after a 10-year struggle, Troy finally fell after the hero Odysseus led his army into the city inside a huge wooden horse. There was another version of Eris that Hesiod wrote about that was considered worthy of praise. This is the one that was said to be created by Zeus as an opposite to Nyx's daughter and represented the struggle caused by competition. This Eris was said to cause even the helpless man to work, to strive, to struggle towards the wealth of his neighbor. Something free market or whatever, late stage capitalism sucks. But knowing how competitive chaos can be, I really think this fits.
Competitive doesn't start to explain her. I've seen her and my father get into a discussion that I think would have devolved into an argument if it had been anybody else but either of the 2 of them, over a game of chess.
That does sound like them. Well, now that we know what her Sailor Scout name is there a celestial body that shares that name? Well, Kind of. Planet Eris is a dwarf planet that was discovered in 2005 as part of the Kuiper Belt, a section of the outer solar system that extends 30 astronomical units past the orbit of Neptune. Pluto and its moon Charon are also found in this area. Think of the Kuiper Belt a bit like the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, only much larger and composed of frozen volatiles like methane, ammonia, and water. It's also home to other dwarf planets like Orcus, Haumea, Koar, and Makemake. True to the goddess' name for, the discovery of the planet Eris in 2005 caused some strife in the scientific community that led directly to the declassification of Pluto as a planet all the way back in 2006.
It's okay, Pluto. I'm not a planet either.
Eris has one orbiting body called dysnomia. Dysnomia refers to the difficulty in recalling words, names, or objects, often a symptom of learning disabilities or neurological conditions, but it's also the name of the sole moon of the dwarf planet Eris, named after the Greek goddess of lawlessness, fitting the theme of Eris meaning strife. Essentially, it's a word-finding problem that's more significant to the common tip-of-the-tongue feeling impacting daily communication. To Greeks, dysnomia was the god of lawlessness and one of Eris's many children. The Athenian statesman Solon used dysnomia in contrast with the term eunomia in order to describe the ideal government, being one of lawfulness and order, which, when you think about it, kind of sounds like Sir Drago, doesn't it?
I wouldn't be the first person to say that they remind me of two sides of the same coin. But, okay, now that we've established a scout identity for Chaos, before we get into our little fanficky part of the crossover, there's something we can't get away without talking about. Not the mythological inspirations that helped create Sailor Moon, but the cultural impact it made. Because if you start comparing Sailor Moon to Dragon Ball, there's no way you can get away without it. First, let's point out that the series mangaka, Naoko Takeuchi, is married to Yoshihiro Togashi, the mangaka for Hunter x Hunter and Yu Yu Hakusho, one of our personal favorites. They're an anime power couple. Naoko even helped with some of the art in both of those series, and the two cross-reference each other constantly. What's even more interesting is that even a lot of people who didn't know what anime was back in the 90s and the early aughts still knew Sailor Moon. Bare Naked Ladies, the Canadian rock band, references Sailor Moon in their song 1 Week with lyrics like, "Get in tune with Sailor Moon, 'cause that cartoon has got the boom. Anime babes that make me think the wrong thing." Moonlight Desetsu is such a banger. They didn't even change the song like they did with Pokemon or Dragon Ball Z. They just changed the lyrics, translated it. That's it. But that's not even the best music Sailor Moon had to offer. The theme of the Sailor Starlights remains one of the absolute best tracks in all of anime. Which is a shame that so few fans got to experience it stateside. The Starlights were cut from the original run of Sailor Moon. Long story short, due to transphobia. Gotta love it. That's sarcasm, by the way. Yeah, we could completely go on a tangent for a minute about how progressive and how out of the box Sailor Moon was for its time, especially in Japan. Zoisite and Kunzite, or Malachite in the dub, were originally a gay couple. Dubs changed Zoisite's gender randomly to woman in order to get around censors, but they weren't the only characters censored this way. Fisheye, one of the minor villains of the Dead Moon Circus arc, was a trans woman, or at least a drag queen. And everyone who knows anything about Sailor Moon knows what they did to Haruka and Michiru, also known as Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune. I mean, cousins? Really? With dialogue like this?
The longevity and the initial success of Sailor Moon proved the anime wasn't just a boys' club, and catered almost exclusively to the female gaze. Sailor Jupiter proves you can be strong, intelligent, and a powerhouse of a woman, yet created to be more effeminate and find love. That those things don't make you less. Sailor Mars is almost always one of people's faves because she was gorgeous, confident, and fiery. Yet she had self-esteem problems like everyone else, and a pressure to uphold the traditions of her family's Shinto shrine. She's mature, yet will still bicker with Usagi like a 10-year-old. It doesn't make her not a person, just a regular girl. People on both sides complain about Tuxedo Mask, saying that it's chauvinistic because he always saves her, or he's useless. Which is it? Neither. They always save each other. They're in love in a very adult and mature and caring relationship.
Yeah, he's there for moral support just as much, if not more, than physical beat them up for me. He saves her from being captured, allowing her time to set up for more strategic assaults. But she'd be screwed if he hadn't released her in the first place, so she could. They aren't just a cheesy romance. They're a partnership. And they're the exact kind of couple that my parents are.
Sailor Moon gave us filler that felt like it belonged. Not a single bit of story felt ham-fisted or shoved in during crucial fight moments like Dragon Ball Z, Bleach, Naruto, or One Piece. Basically the total opposite of the demanding way shonen anime is written.
God, can we not talk about Bleach?
The show was fully capable of making you laugh, actually light-hearted laugh at everyday things. In the next episode, you'd feel someone's death in your soul, and they never felt weird about being in the same show. The show was so well put together. It's still praised for having such a high amount of filler that didn't mess with the story and gave us information that was never just not to be considered canon. It was info that made you get to know the characters better and care more about even secondary villains. So many of them weren't just monster of the week bad guys, and even the ones that were typically represented real everyday people whose desires or feelings have been corrupted by a cruel world around them. Known for being one of the first and best at the trope of, now I know what drives the bad guy, I can't just write them off as evil, meaning I must hate them anymore. It's a trope that will go on to inform a lot of similar type of stories and can be seen in everything from Persona 5 to Miraculous Ladybug.
Oh God, now we have to deal with Miraculous Ladybug?
No, we don't. But the magical transformation sequence in Sailor Moon was heavily inspired by fairy tale stories, most notably Cinderella. Yeah, think about it. During the night, she dons a magical dress and falls in a secret love affair with the prince, who otherwise doesn't notice her existence until much later in the series. But also there are two entire adversaries in Sailor Moon named after Cinderella. Dorella is a glass monster connected to the Dark Moon and summoned by Jadeite. In Japanese, their name is literally Shinderera, a transliteration of Cinderella.
That's adorable!
Later in Sailor Moon S, Kyanite summons Cenicienta, another glass monster. La Cenicienta is a Spanish name for Cinderella. This connection actually came from a commenter on one of our live streams after I was introduced to Cinderillion, Kasumi's persona from P5 Royal. Cinderillion is a French name for Cinderella, and I noted that Kasumi's transformation is the most Sailor Moon inspired out of all the Persona awakenings. Shout out to Wraith for pointing out this fact.
Epic, pretty, and cool. So why don't we close this out with the moment they've all been waiting for? The fanfic.
Alright. I want to apologize to Bree and Chaos because I know this is cringeworthy, but here it goes. For much of her life, Chaos traveled from planet to planet trying to find purpose, home, and belonging. For all intents and purposes, she was an orphan who remembered nothing about her past, but always carried a special pendant that she knew held a deep meaning and a connection to her true identity. Chaos began her interstellar journey near the constellation Draco, which is in the Orion Cygnus arm of the Milky Way galaxy. However, in order to get to Earth, she would have to pass through the Carnea Sagittarius arm, where the planet Kinmoku was located. Kinmoku was the original home of the Sailor Starlights, and is strongly implied to be the origin of all Sailor Scout powers. The logic here becomes, well, simple. In passing through this section of the galaxy, either Chaos visits Kinmoku before its destruction, and is seen by the people there as a powerful warrior. Because of this, she's trained as a Senshi, or As they're searching for the Princess Kakyu, the Stellar Starlights arrive directly on Chaos's ship, the Exodus, and begin asking questions about Kakyu. Chaos can't give them answers. Hell, I don't even know who I am. Sorry about your princess, though. The medallion Chaos wears seems to react to the Starlights, though, and her Sailor Scout persona is awakened. She comes out as Sailor Discordia, the Sailor Scout of Chaos, and the Starlights quickly depart after recognizing that the corruption by Chaos is what changed Galaxia. But they leave her with a warning. Don't let the chaos consume you. Don't let it corrupt your true heart.
I really hope you didn't hurt yourself too much with all that stretching, Agni.
Yeah, you can tell I didn't really watch Sailor Moon, but hey, whether you rage or laugh in the comments, at least I got your attention. Who was your favorite Sailor Scout, and when did you start watching anime? What crossover ideas should we try out next? Tell me, but also like, subscribe, and ring my bell.
Our bell!
And we'll see you all again next week. I want to thank every one of you once again this week for coming to these ramblings of an anxiety-ridden pyromancer.
And her dragon best friend. We're a small team just doing our best to bring our stories we've loved for decades and hope they're the kind you like too.
With a side info dump of psychology, lore, history, and social awareness.
If this is your first video, we hope you'll stay for another one. And maybe you could consider becoming a subscriber. We'd love to see you again.
Our subscribers can move mountains for a channel like this. The engagement we get just keeps growing each week. You guys are getting the word out and people are listening.
And we really can't express how grateful we are to see our passion project take off. 20 years of love and dedication are here laid bare. Help as much as you care to, but at least watch and talk with us.
Of course, we can't close out a video without giving a shout out to our patrons. Emily Masternardi,
Heinrich 28,
Pammy Poo,
JC Moreland,
Shadow Fox,
Charles Tam,
Arya Gamari,
Lundair Lumen. But also don't forget our channel members, Moose Now,
Jack McLeod,
Plebe 64 Potato,
Lundair Lumen,
7 Stars Sanctuary,
and Chained Furry, Many a Mickle Maximuckle.
See you next week.